Cambodia is not a rich country. It is not a global power. It does not have the kind of economy that typically makes headlines in international aviation circles. With a GDP of roughly $30 billion and a population that is still largely rural, Cambodia sits firmly in what economists call the developing world. And yet, over the last decade, this small kingdom has been moving, quietly but decisively, to modernize its economy, expand its infrastructure, and open itself to the world. Tourism has been a major engine of that growth. Before the COVID-19 pandemic struck in 2020, Cambodia was welcoming more than 6 million international visitors every year, many of them arriving through its two main airports in Phnom Penh and Siem Reap. And Sihanouk, the gateway to the ancient temples of Angkor Wat, one of the most visited UNESCO World Heritage Sites on Earth. The aviation sector became critical to Cambodia's economic ambitions, and in recent years, Phnom Penh made a significant investment in that future. In 2023, the kingdom opened the spectacular Techo International Airport, a brand new world-class facility built just south of the capital. This is no ordinary regional airport. It is classified as a 4F grade airport, which means it is equipped to handle the largest commercial aircraft in existence, including the massive Airbus A380 and the Boeing 747 jumbo jet. It can process tens of millions of passengers annually. It is the kind of infrastructure that says, we are open for business and we are thinking big. And Cambodia's national flag carrier, Air Cambodia, needed an equally ambitious fleet to match that vision. On the 8th of September 2025, something remarkable happened at a signing ceremony that brought together officials from both Phnom Penh and Beijing. Air Cambodia, the flag carrier of the Royal Government of Cambodia, and the only airline in the country to hold both the prestigious IAT Operational Safety Audit certification and a Skytrax 3-star rating, signed a formal memorandum of understanding with COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China. The agreement to purchase 20 C909 regional jets. 10 of those aircraft were firm orders, locked in and confirmed. The remaining 10 were listed as intended orders, tied to future demand for passenger travel. The total value of the deal was reported at approximately $380 million, a significant commitment for any airline, let alone one from a small developing nation. The announcement was made public by Wang Wenbin, China's ambassador to Cambodia, who posted about the agreement on his official social media account, calling it a new development in cooperation in the aviation sector of the two countries, with important benefits for both parties. But here is the question that everyone in the aviation world immediately began asking. Why Chinese aircraft? Why not Boeing? Why not Airbus? The answer, as it turns out, is far more layered than a simple purchase order. It is a story about geopolitics, economics, technology, and the quiet reshaping of the global order. To understand the C909, you need to understand COMAC COI and why this company's very existence makes Western aerospace executives lose sleep at night. COMAC, which stands for the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, was founded in May 2008 in Shanghai. It was created for one explicit purpose: to end China's total dependence on Western commercial aircraft and to build a domestic aviation industry capable of competing with Boeing and Airbus on the global stage. This was not an accident. This was a strategy, a long, patient, state-backed strategy. China had spent decades purchasing aircraft from both American and European manufacturers. Every time a Chinese airline ordered a new Boeing 737 or an Airbus A320, hundreds of millions of dollars flowed out of China and into Western coffers. Beijing looked at this arrangement and decided it was unacceptable. So it committed massive government resources, money, talent, research facilities, and political will to building its own commercial aircraft industry from the ground up. COMAC's first major product was the aircraft we now know as the C909, originally developed under the name AERJ 21xiangfeng, which translates poetically to Soaring Phoenix. This regional jet was the result of a development program that began as far back as March 2002. The first prototype was assembled in December 2007. The aircraft made its maiden flight on November 28, 2008 from Shanghai, But making something fly is only part of the challenge. Making it safe enough to carry passengers and convincing regulators that it is another matter entirely. COMAC spent years navigating the demanding certification process of China's Civil Aviation Administration, CAAC. The C909 finally received its type certificate on December 30th, 2014, 12 years after development began. It entered commercial passenger service on June 28, 2016, when Chengdu Airlines launched the first revenue flight with the type. In November 2024, as part of a broader brand strategy, COMAC rebranded the ARJ21 as the C909. The C stands for both China and COMAC. The 909 reflects the aircraft's approximate 90-seat capacity. It was a name change that signalled ambition, aligning this regional jet under the same brand family as the larger C919 narrowbody and the widebody C929 currently under development. COMAC was no longer just a manufacturer, it was building a portfolio. And it was coming for Boeing and Airbus. So what exactly is the C909? Let us break it down. The C909 is a regional jet, meaning it is designed not for long-haul intercontinental flights, but for shorter domestic routes and regional connections between neighbouring countries. Think of it as the workhorse of the skies. Reliable, cost-efficient, and perfectly sized for the kinds of routes that connect smaller cities within a country or link nearby nations across Southeast Asia. In terms of capacity, the C909 seats between 78 and 97 passengers, depending on configuration. Its range spans from 2,225 kilometres to 3,700 kilometres, more than enough to connect Phnom Penh to Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, Kuala Lumpur, or Singapore with ease. It is powered by General Electric CF34-1 OA turbofan engines, Morni. American-built power plants that provide the kind of reliability international operators demand. Some analysts in the Western aviation press have noted that the C909's airframe design draws heavily from the old McDonnell Douglas MD-80 series, a classic American aircraft platform from the 1980s. COMAC disputes this characterization, maintaining that the C909 is an indigenous Chinese design. What is undeniable, however, is that the aircraft has benefited from decades of accumulated aerospace knowledge. Some of it domestic, some of it absorbed through international partnerships and technology transfers. Critics have also pointed out that the C909 is not the most technologically advanced regional jet on the market. Its closest international competitor in the same seat category is the Embraer E190-E2 and E195-E2 from Brazil, aircraft that are more fuel efficient, slightly larger, and equipped with newer generation engines. The Embraer jets are more expensive to purchase, but arguably deliver better long-term economics for certain operators. But here is where it gets interesting. For Cambodia, and for many other developing nations considering their options, the decision to choose an aircraft is never just about the aircraft itself. It is about the total package, the price, the financing terms, the political relationships, the after-sales support, and the geopolitical alignments that come with the deal. And in that context, COMAC has some very compelling advantages. Here is something that most mainstream aviation coverage tends to gloss over. Aircraft purchases are never purely commercial decisions. They are political events dressed in technical clothing. When a country buys aircraft, it is also buying relationships. It is choosing allies. It is signalling to the world and to its own people where it stands in the grand competition between great powers. Cambodia has made its position quite clear over many years. China is Cambodia's most trusted and most consequential partner. That is not rhetoric. It is economic reality. Consider the numbers. In 2024 alone, two-way trade between China and Cambodia reached $17.83 billion, an increase of more than 20% compared to the previous year. China has been Cambodia's largest trading partner for 13 consecutive years running. Not second, not third. First, 13 years in a row. Chinese investment has transformed Cambodia's landscape in ways that are visible from the ground and from the air. The Siem Reap Angkor International Airport, a flagship Belt and Road Initiative project, was built with Chinese investment and expertise. The Phnom Penh Sihanoukville Expressway, another Chinese-built project, reduced travel time between the two cities from 5 hours to just 2, cutting logistics costs by 40%. Chinese hydropower plants and solar farms now account for more than 60% of Cambodia's total installed electricity capacity. The Sihanoukville Special Economic Zone hosts over 200 companies and employs approximately 32,000 workers. This is not investment, this is integration. And when you understand the depth of that integration, Cambodia's decision to buy Chinese aircraft stops looking like a surprise and starts looking entirely inevitable. On the commercial side, COMAC also offers something that Boeing and Airbus are increasingly unable to deliver: availability and flexible financing. Both Western manufacturers are struggling with enormous backlogs. Airlines that order Boeing 737 MAX or Airbus A320, family aircraft today, are often looking at wait times stretching 5, 6, or even 7 years before delivery. For a small national carrier trying to expand its fleet and capitalise on growing tourism demand, that kind of wait is commercially devastating. COMAC, by contrast, can offer faster delivery windows. It can offer favourable financing terms backed by Chinese state banks. And it can offer something priceless in the world of international aviation: a supplier who has powerful reasons, political, strategic, and economic, to make sure the deal works and the operator succeeds. It would be unfair to tell this story without acknowledging the extraordinary challenges facing Boeing, and how those challenges have created an opening that COMAC is now moving aggressively to exploit. Boeing, once the undisputed symbol of American industrial excellence, has been through a period of profound crisis. The catastrophic grounding of the 737 MAX following 2 fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019, accidents that together claimed 346 lives, devastated the company's reputation, triggered billions of dollars in legal liabilities, and led to a fundamental rethinking of the company's safety culture. A Senate investigation described the events leading up to those crashes as a story of Boeing's failure, and called out regulatory failures at the FAA as well. The reputational damage was immense, and the company has not fully recovered. More recently, quality control crises involving door plug incidents on newer aircraft models, combined with production slowdowns, supply chain disruptions, and a strike by machinists in late 2024, have kept Boeing under sustained pressure. Deliveries have been delayed, orders have been postponed, and trust, particularly among smaller, price-sensitive operators in the developing world, has eroded. Interestingly, even in the Cambodian deal, Boeing was not entirely absent from the picture. At roughly the same time that Air Cambodia was signing its COMAC memorandum, the Cambodian government was also in separate negotiations to purchase 10 Boeing 737-800 MAX aircraft. A deal linked specifically to Cambodia's efforts to reduce tariffs in its trade relationship with the United States under the Trump administration. Those negotiations required Cambodia to reduce tariffs on American goods to 0 while purchasing American aircraft as part of a broader trade arrangement. What that tells us is subtle but important. Cambodia was not rejecting America entirely. It was balancing. It was playing the great powers against each other with the pragmatic skill of a small nation that has learned through painful historical experience how to survive in a world shaped by forces far larger than itself. But the Chinese aircraft deal came first, and it was bigger. Cambodia is not alone, and that is perhaps the most significant aspect of this story. When the COMAC deal was announced in September 2025, a spokesperson for Cambodia's Civil Aviation Authority noted something important. The C909 was already operating passenger flights in multiple countries in the ASEAN region. Indonesia, Laos, and Vietnam all have airlines flying the C909 on active routes. Brunei was reported to be in serious consideration of the same aircraft. Let us look at each of these cases briefly, because together they paint a picture of a regional trend. In Indonesia, the airline Transnusa became COMAC's first overseas customer, the very first foreign airline in history to put a Chinese-made jet into commercial passenger service. Transnusa began flying the C909 on routes connecting Indonesian cities, and the aircraft performed well enough to encourage further interest from the region. In Laos, the national carrier Lao Airlines has been steadily building a C909 presence. In September 2025, it took delivery of its second C909 and promptly launched cross-border service to Bangkok, the Thai capital. A significant milestone that demonstrated the aircraft's ability to operate effectively on international routes. Meanwhile, Comac made headlines by reportedly exploring a proposal to take a majority stake in the debt-troubled Lao national carrier itself, a move that would embed Chinese aerospace interest even more deeply into Southeast Asian aviation infrastructure. In Vietnam, where Chinese diplomatic relations have historically been complex, C909 aircraft have nonetheless found their way onto domestic routes. The aircraft's economics and availability made it a practical choice, even in a country that approaches its relationship with Beijing with considerable caution. And as recently as April 2026, Vietjet, one of Vietnam's largest low-cost carriers, signed a lease agreement for 10 C909 regional jets, further expanding the type's footprint in the region. By mid-2025, Comac had delivered 166 C909 aircraft in total, with 157 of those in active service across 12 airlines. Domestically in China, 150 C909s were operating on nearly 800 routes. And here is a striking data point that Comac proudly highlights. The utilization rate of C909s operated by foreign airlines actually exceeds the utilization rate of domestically operated aircraft amount high, meaning foreign operators are flying these jets more intensively, suggesting confidence in the aircraft's reliability and commercial viability. Production is also accelerating. In 2024, Comac delivered a record 35 C909 aircraft in a single year, a modest number by Boeing or Airbus standards, but a meaningful milestone for a manufacturer still in the growth phase of its industrial ramp-up. As of March 2026, 210 C909 aircraft had been built in total, and the production line was showing no signs of slowing down. Southeast Asia, with a population of over 700 million people and rapidly expanding middle classes hungry for air travel, represents one of the most important aviation growth markets in the world. Comac has identified this region as its primary international beachhead, and it is executing that strategy with patience, discipline, and the full financial firepower of the Chinese state behind it. In October 2024, Comac opened representative offices in Hong Kong and Singapore, positioning itself at the heart of Asian finance and aviation networks. The message was clear. Comac is not merely a domestic manufacturer. It intends to be a global player, and Southeast Asia is where that global story begins. Now we must address the elephant in the room, the question that airlines, regulators, passengers, and industry analysts cannot stop asking: are Chinese aircraft safe? And can the world trust them? This is not a question asked out of prejudice. It is a question asked out of the same rigorous scrutiny that every aircraft manufacturer in the world must face. Aviation is the most safety-conscious transportation industry on the planet. Every aircraft that carries passengers must clear extraordinary regulatory hurdles before a single paying customer steps on board. And here is the honest answer. The C909's safety record is genuinely good. Since entering commercial service in June 2016, the C909 has accumulated 0 fatal accidents in nearly a decade of operations. It has carried more than 24 million passengers on more than 700 routes. It has been flown by major Chinese airlines including Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern, carriers that operate to international safety standards and whose aircraft maintenance programs are regularly audited. The aircraft has gone through summer heat and winter cold, mountain routes and coastal hops, and has performed with a reliability that has surprised even some of its most vocal skeptics. By 2025, daily utilization of the C909 had risen to approximately 4 hours per day, up from less than 1 hour per day when the aircraft first entered service in 2018. That growth reflects operators becoming more comfortable with the type and integrating it more deeply into their networks. It still falls short of the 7-hour per day average for narrow-body jets globally, but the trajectory is clearly moving in the right direction. However, and this is a critical however, the C909 does not hold FAA certification from the United States. It does not hold EASA certification from Europe. And without those two approvals, the aircraft cannot fly in the airspace of most Western nations, and Western airlines cannot operate it. For COMAC's larger C919R, the aircraft that truly threatens Boeing and Airbus in the mainline narrow-body market, the certification gap is even more acute. EASA's Executive Director Florian Guillemet stated in April 2025 that the C919 would not receive European certification before 2028 at the earliest, and that the process could potentially extend as far as 2031. That is a timeline measured not in months, but in years. And without that certification, the C919 cannot expand beyond Chinese and Hong Kong airspace in any meaningful way. For Southeast Asian markets like Cambodia, however, this Western certification gap matters much less than you might expect. These countries operate their own aviation regulatory frameworks. They have the authority to accept aircraft certified by China's CAAC, and many have done exactly that. The political and economic incentives to do so, particularly for nations deeply integrated into Chinese investment frameworks, are substantial. But it is worth noting that this dual standard creates a fragmented global aviation market. One track for aircraft approved by Western regulators, and another track for aircraft operating outside that system. How that fragmentation evolves over the next decade will shape the future of the entire industry. The C909 deal with Cambodia is meaningful in its own right. But to truly understand its significance, you need to zoom out and look at the larger strategic picture that COMAC is assembling piece by piece. COMAC is not a one-product company. It is building a complete family of commercial aircraft designed to cover every segment of the market, from regional jets to single-aisle, workhorses to wide-body, long-haul aircraft. The C909 handles regional routes, the short hops between cities, the connections between secondary airports, the bread-and-butter flying that keeps small to medium-sized airlines commercially alive. The C919 is COMAC's flagship, a single-aisle narrow-body jet carrying between 156 and 168 passengers, directly targeting the world's two best-selling aircraft, the Airbus A320neo and the Boeing 737 MAX. The C919 entered commercial service in China in 2023 with China Eastern Airlines and has since been ordered by multiple Chinese carriers. As of mid-2025, 19 C919s were in commercial service, with that number expected to grow significantly as production ramps up. And then there is the C929R, so you get a wide-body aircraft currently in development that is intended to challenge the Airbus A330neo and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner on long-haul international routes, with a projected capacity of 280 to 400 passengers and a range of approximately 12,000 kilometres. The C929 would, if it enters service, complete COMAC's full-service portfolio. The CEO of Airbus, Guillaume Faury, acknowledged this trajectory in a remark that has been widely quoted in aviation circles. He noted that the industry could evolve from a duopoly to a potential triopoly, a quiet but profound acknowledgement that China's aerospace ambitions are not fantasy. They are reality in the making. There are real challenges ahead for COMAC, to be sure. Production rates remain far below those of Boeing and Airbus. The company delivers aircraft in the dozens per year, where its Western rivals deliver in the hundreds. Its C919 relies on Western-supplied components, including CFM International LEAP 1, C engines, a joint product of GE Aviation, and France's Safran, creating a dependency that the US government briefly exploited in 2025 by temporarily restricting the supply of those engines to China. The lifting of those restrictions in July 2025 provided relief, but the episode highlighted a genuine vulnerability in COMAC's supply chain. COMAC is also working on developing entirely domestic engines to replace its reliance on foreign suppliers, but analysts believe that program is unlikely to produce operationally ready power plants before 2030 at the earliest. These are not trivial obstacles. Building a world-class commercial aircraft is perhaps the most technologically demanding manufacturing challenge that exists. COMAC is learning that lesson in real time, and yet, the company is flying, its aircraft are carrying passengers, its order books are growing. And country by country, deal by deal, it is establishing an international presence that simply did not exist a decade ago. Let us return to Cambodia and to what this deal actually means for the people who live there. For Air Cambodia, the acquisition of 20 C909 jets represents more than just new hardware. It represents a strategic fleet modernization. The C909's range of up to 3,700 kilometers means that Air Cambodia can fly direct routes to destinations across Southeast Asia and parts of South Asia and East Asia without requiring intermediate stops. For a carrier looking to expand its network and compete for the growing wave of regional tourists, particularly Chinese visitors, of which 53,291 arrived in Cambodia in just the first 7 months of 2025, a 21% increase over the previous year. This kind of connectivity is commercially vital. The year 2025 was also designated as Cambodia-China Tourism Year, a symbolic and practical initiative aimed at deepening people-to-people ties and boosting visitor flows in both directions. Chinese tourists represent one of the most powerful forces in global tourism economics. They travel in large numbers, they spend significantly, and they tend to favour destinations with strong, direct air links. More aircraft connecting Cambodia to Chinese cities means more Chinese visitors arriving in Siem Reap, Phnom Penh, and the newly opened Teko International Airport. More visitors means more hotel nights, more restaurant meals, more handicraft purchases, more jobs. For a country where tourism represents a major share of foreign exchange earnings, Cambodia earned approximately $348 million from agricultural rice exports alone in the first 8 months of 2025, suggesting the scale of effort needed to generate economic activity. Every additional aircraft matters. Every new route is a new economic artery. There are, of course, legitimate questions to be asked. Airline economics in developing countries can be brutal. Operating a new type of aircraft requires investment in pilot training, maintenance capabilities, spare parts inventory, and ground support infrastructure. Cambodia will need to ensure it has the technical ecosystem in place to operate the C909 safely and efficiently. COMAC has committed to providing training and operational support as part of the MOU framework, but the details of those commitments will matter enormously when the aircraft actually arrive. There is also the longer-term question of fleet diversity. Operating a single aircraft type from a single manufacturer creates dependencies. If COMAC's support network proves thin, if spare parts are slow to arrive, if technical difficulties emerge that require specialist expertise, Air Cambodia could find itself in an operationally difficult position. These are not hypothetical concerns. They are the practical realities that airline executives must weigh carefully when signing any fleet deal. But here is what's also true. Cambodia's leadership has clearly decided that these risks are manageable and that the rewards outweigh them. The political relationship with China provides a backstop of support that goes far beyond what any purely commercial aircraft contract could offer. In a world where geopolitics and aviation are becoming increasingly intertwined, that backstop is a form of insurance. We would be telling only half of this story if we did not discuss what this deal represents in the broader landscape of great power competition. The United States and China are engaged in a sustained, multi-front contest for influence across the developing world. That contest plays out in trade policy, in technology standards, in infrastructure investment, and, increasingly, in the sky above us. America's aviation industry has traditionally been one of its most powerful instruments of soft power. When a country buys Boeing aircraft, it is not just buying aeroplanes. It is plugging into an American ecosystem, American spare parts, American training programs, American maintenance standards, American financing relationships. It creates commercial dependencies that reinforce political relationships. For decades, that ecosystem was so dominant that virtually no developing country thought seriously about alternatives. China is now building an alternative ecosystem, and it is doing so with the full resources and patience of a state that takes a multi-decade view of strategic competition. The C909 deals in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, are not just commercial transactions. They are the early architecture of a competing aviation ecosystem, one that runs on Chinese standards, Chinese certification, Chinese financing, Chinese parts, and Chinese training. One that does not require FAA or EASA approval. One that, as it expands, creates a zone of the global aviation market that operates increasingly outside the reach of Western regulatory and commercial influence. This is precisely why Western observers have been watching COMAC's progress with a mixture of skepticism, concern, and grudging respect. The skepticism is real. COMAC still has much to prove in terms of production efficiency, global competitiveness, and technological sophistication. The concern is equally real because China's track record in other technology sectors, from electric vehicles to telecommunications to solar panels, suggests that writing it off would be a serious mistake. Huawei was once dismissed as a manufacturer of cheap, unreliable telecom equipment. Today, it is building the infrastructure of the next generation of global communications. China's electric vehicle companies were once laughed at by European and American car executives. Today, BYD is the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer by sales volume, and European governments are imposing tariffs to protect their own industries from being overwhelmed. Could commercial aviation be next? Could COMAC, decade by decade, follow the same trajectory? From a niche supplier in friendly markets to a genuine global force that reshapes the competitive landscape. History suggests the question deserves to be taken seriously, very seriously. Before we conclude, we should be honest about where the global aviation market actually stands today, because the headlines can sometimes distort the picture. Boeing and Airbus are not in danger of collapse. Not remotely. Both manufacturers sit atop order backlogs measured in the thousands of aircraft or commitments that will take a decade or more to fulfill even at full production rates. Airlines around the world are clamoring for new fuel-efficient aircraft to replace aging fleets and meet surging post-pandemic demand. The market has never been more hungry for aircraft, and Boeing and Airbus are the primary suppliers meeting that demand. COMAC's total C909 deliveries, 210 aircraft built over nearly a decade, Namao, represent a fraction of the global commercial fleet. Its C919 is still largely confined to Chinese domestic routes. Its C929 is years away from flying passengers. By comparison, Airbus delivered 766 aircraft in 2024 alone. Boeing, despite its difficulties, delivered 348 aircraft in the same year. The scale gap is enormous, but the relevant question is not where COMAC stands today. It is where COMAC will stand in 2035, in 2040, in 2050. And on that longer time horizon, the trajectory is unmistakably upward. China's domestic aviation market is one of the largest in the world and is forecast to continue growing rapidly. COMAC benefits from captive demand at home. Chinese airlines have been encouraged, and in some cases directed, to prioritize Chinese-made aircraft. That guaranteed home market provides the financial stability and the operational data that COMAC needs to refine its products and build its reputation. Every year that C909s and C919s fly without incident in China and across Southeast Asia is another year of accumulated data, refined operations, and strengthened credibility. In aviation, trust is built slowly, year by year, flight by flight. COMAC is doing exactly that. Building trust, one landing at a time. So what does the future look like? What does the Cambodia deal tell us about where this is all heading? Several things are becoming clear. First, Southeast Asia is going to be the proving ground for Chinese commercial aviation. The region's combination of rapid economic growth, expanding middle classes, relatively relaxed regulatory environments regarding Chinese certifications, and deep political economic ties with Beijing makes it the ideal incubator for COMAC's international ambitions. Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia. These are not outliers, they are the leading edge of a much larger wave. Second, the Airbus-Boeing duopoly is going to face its most serious challenge, not in the markets where it is currently strongest, North America, Europe, Northeast Asia, but in the markets where it has often taken customers for granted. The developing world is where the next billionaire travellers will come from, and China is offering those markets something Western manufacturers often cannot. a sense of partnership, of shared destiny, of being valued rather than merely tolerated. Third, geopolitics will increasingly drive aircraft purchasing decisions in ways that make purely commercial analysis inadequate. As the world divides, slowly, imperfectly, but perceptibly, into competing zones of economic and political alignment, aircraft fleets will increasingly reflect those alignments. Countries that are deep in China's orbit will fly Chinese aircraft. Countries aligned with the West will continue to fly Boeing and Airbus. And the countries in between, the non-aligned, the pragmatic, the strategically flexible Farsi, will do what Cambodia is doing: buy from both sides and negotiate the best possible terms from each. Fourth, the pace of COMAC's evolution matters enormously. If the company manages to achieve EASA and FAA certification for the C919 within the next 5 to 8 years, a timeline that looks challenging but not impossible given the pace of its regulatory engagement, the competitive landscape will shift significantly. Certification would open up airline markets that are currently closed to COMAC and would transform it from a regional player into a genuine global competitor almost overnight. And fifth, perhaps most importantly, the story of Cambodia and the C909 reminds us that aviation is never just about aeroplanes. It is about power, about who shapes the rules, who sets the standards, who controls the infrastructure that connects the world. The sky, it turns out, is not neutral. It never was.